And we are live. What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, where we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. I say it all too often, but it is true all that often. That today is no exception. You're about to meet two phenomenal women who are experts in their field and have a lot to offer when it comes to the Alec Murdock trial. And speaking of Mr. Murdoch, it is day 2 of what is being billed as the trial of the century in South Carolina. Alec Murdock, as you know, comes from South Carolina's Low Country. His father, grandfather, and great-grandfather were all prosecutors in Colleton County, South Carolina. He's now on trial for a double homicide of his wife, and you don't hear this often, of his son as well. And that is just a fraction of the story. Now, a portrait, I mentioned this yesterday, but I find this very interesting because it speaks to some of the issues in this area where the trial is taking place. A portrait of Murdoch's grandfather, Randolph Buster Murdaugh Jr. He served as the 14th Circuit solicitor for nearly a half a century. That portrait had to be removed from the courthouse before the trial even began. Now, we've got two of our best guests here to break it all down. The woman in the camel-looking turtleneck, if that is what I'm looking at correctly. She is Myrtle Beach's criminal defense attorney, Amy Lawrence, and she is many things to many people. She is a victim advocate, a voice for the weak, the 2020 Supreme Court of South Carolina pro bono honor roll recipient, and most important of all, a mother.
Yeah.
She fights for the civil rights of the wrongfully accused every day in her practice, handling civil rights, police brutality, and misconduct, and criminal defense dockets at the lovely law firm. As you see, her name is hyphenated, Lawrence Lovely. And in the short time I spoke to her this afternoon, I was impressed that she curses more than my lovely mother, who's not here co-hosting today, but we'll try to keep this show clean.
I'll try.
The other woman, where it says the Human Behavior Academy over her left shoulder, that is Susan Constantine. She is one of the nation's leading jury consultants. She's also, listen to this, a body language and communications expert. She can probably tell I still haven't had time to build my chair, so I'm sitting on a stack of pillows and I keep sliding, so forgive my body language. One of these days I'll get to actually putting together a proper chair for this proper podcast. She is the owner of the Human Behavior Lab. Her subjective analysis of potential jurors' body language, voice, and statements during voir dire assist attorneys to spot potentially dangerous jurors who may render an unfavorable verdict. To me, this is so fascinating. As the son of a psychiatrist and social worker, she does some interesting work. If she looks familiar, that's because you've seen her on Dateline, Today, Fox and Friends, and many other big-time shows. Quick housekeeping notes already. Tilo says, I love Susan. See, they already know who Ms. Constantine is. Now, you can follow us on Insta, Facebook, Twitter. We're at Podcast STS. My mother says, stop pushing all the other stuff, but please support us on Patreon. You can get a YouTube subscription. And as my 8-year-old daughter says, please subscribe and please smash that like button. It helps get the algorithm chugging. To Susan first. Day 2 of jury selection. The jury pool of 600 people was narrowed down to 120, and final selection is expected Wednesday. Does this all appear, in your opinion, to be going according to plan, whoever's plan that might be, but most notably the judge presiding over this case?
Yeah, it was the judge's plan. I mean, he's the one that set out that jury selection, how long it would take. I think he gave a week, 3 weeks for the trial. So based on probably the witnesses they have already prepared, knowing that there's all kinds of motions they have to deal with, you know, I have trust in the judicial system. So I think that and I love this judge. I don't know if Amy, you've been watching this judge, but I think he's stellar.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
Great. So anyway, yeah, so I think that they're going to be right on point. I think they're going to be able to do it and get it done and finished with just on time.
And Susan, we've got a comment up already from DB. I'd be a perfect juror. I had not heard of this case until a few days ago. You're the one that helps decide. What else would you want to know about DB if you were going to seat either him or her, I'm not sure which, on this jury?
I think that's a really great question. Thanks for asking that. I haven't had that asked to me before. But since he's part of the show here and wants to know, I really want to know a little bit more about his background. I want to know his value system. I want to know what he does. I want him to describe who he is in 3 words or less. And then I want to flip over and I want him to tell me how other people would view him in 3 words or less. That kind of gives me a little insight into how he sees himself, how others do. And then I hitchhike off from things that he says that will prompt some interest in asking additional questions. So what I don't do is ask the why questions. I really want the potential juror to open up and just organically talk about or answer a question that attorneys ask for, because in that, those are really important nuggets to pull out. So what I'm looking for is that person going to be more suited for the prosecution or more for the defense? Is this person a type of person that can set things aside and be more objective? Now, I do believe that, and I think that Amy will agree, that everybody has biases. We all do. The point is that are they able to set it aside? And we hear this all the time. And actually, I get kind of a little over it because I really want to know more about you, what your value system is, and so that I can see if you would fit if I were working for the defense or versus the prosecution. If not, I'm going to be making some notations to get you gone.
We're gonna roll and have fun today, as we always do. I think both Susan and Amy sort of wanted to punch me in the nose because I was running around and things were hectic behind the scenes, but we are flowing now. Amy, I don't want to keep you. I know you had a comment to make, so go ahead and make your comment because we have fun and roll with the punches.
So what is most frustrating about South Carolina is we follow the federal rule where it is not attorney-led voir dire. We have the judge ask the questions, and so we never get to that next, that one that leads into it. I'm trained I'm Jerry Spence trained with attorney-led voir dire. So it it eats at me because I'm with Susan. I want to know, we want to peel back the onion. What is that feeling? Why do you have that feeling? And, I've got to show a mine before they'll ever show me theirs. Right. Mm-hmm. And so in order to get that, you're just never going to get it when you have a judge on a bench asking these questions in the most sterile way. And I think that it's a huge disservice to everybody involved, both sides, because we never really know that part of it. We never get to peel back that onion. At least we try to. But it's really, really hard in South Carolina, and it's really disheartening.
So my question, can I ask Amy a question? With that being said, thank you for sharing that, because that brings some insight into this jury selection process in that state. So are you basing everything primarily on the juror questionnaire? Are you kind of sifting through that? Can you determine who might be more egalitarian, more authoritarian? And then tell me about your process, how you do it in South Carolina.
So I am a nut job, right? I am all in and everything I do 150%. And I research my entire staff. We all take our potential jury, and they actually had 900. They sent out 900 jury questionnaires. So we actually went from 900 to that low, to get to this one. I think 122 is our last count of numbers, what we're going to pick from. And we did a really in-depth, in this case, like we would have in federal court or in a death penalty case, a really in-depth questionnaire with our jury pool. So I think that gave them a lot more, insight into the jury like you would have in federal court, because normally you get nothing. You get their name and address. So what we do is we do a deep dive into their social media, right? So I just tried back-to-back federal civil rights trials in federal court, 1983, and had great verdicts, right? popped them both. And the first thing I did was dig into their, because it was against the police department, right? So the first thing I did was like, what political party, what are they listening to? I was looking at their Spotify. I was looking at anything and everything that I could consume to try to get there, because it's so hard.
Mm-hmm. I get it. I mean, that has to be really grueling, but I love the fact that you're using the social media. And this is one of the questions that's asked to me too, is like when I'm in trial, I have a second chair person actually looking up anything there is to be found out about that person, right? Because I want to know what they're blogging, who they're talking to, what groups they belong to, what's important to them, what are they posting, what do those pictures look like? I want to know more about that person, because if you don't have like open voir dire, and you'll be able to ask all these enrolling questions. I mean, that is so hard. And literally, you should probably just pick 12 people, put them in the jury box, and start there, right?
Sometimes it feels like, sometimes it's just gut. A big part of it is just gut. Like everything in my being says no, right? I've looked at my defendant before, and I said, and he's like, no, yeah. And I'm like, everything in my being, like my gut is usually right. This is my knowing. No, the answer is no. We're striking them.
This is my favorite kind of panel where I get to just kick back and watch like it's a tennis match here. I love it. We're going to get back into some of the jury selection in one moment. It was interesting. We had another jury consultant on last night, Susan, a gentleman named Dan Wolbert. I don't know if you're familiar. He's out of Florida too. A very astute, smart man. And he was talking about how you don't really want a fair jury necessarily. You want a jury that's going to, work for your client to get the verdict that you're looking for. Before we get back to some of that, a lot of the talk has just been about how this area of South Carolina is a good old boys club. So Amy, to you, from Mona Walker, do you think it's possible for his name, the Murdoch name, to once again save him? And by the way, why do people call him Alec Murdock if his name is spelled Alex Murdaugh? I've been having a lot of questions about that. Is that a Southern thing, or is that just a Murdaugh thing?
It's actually a Scottish thing, right? It's a Scottish thing, and that's where when you see the red hair, right? It's a Scottish thing. It's not necessarily a Southern thing. It's a Scottish thing, and it's always been like, I mean, everybody knows the Murdoch family. I mean, I'm 3 hours away from Colleton and Hampton County. And if you want to bring his law firm, PMP, or his former law firm, now the Parker Group, but PMPD, we call it pimped. If you wanted to bring a case or file a case in that county, you have to pretty much, you don't file it yourself, you co-counsel with them and they bring the case. And they have represented everyone in that county, that law firm, or if it's someone's family member, which is just insane. And they get really big verdicts. We're talking a very small rural community, a lot of people of color, right? And the county is very poor. I mean, the rich are very rich, but the poor are very poor. There's a huge socioeconomic differentiation from where the Murdochs were to where these people are. I think there is absolutely a chance that he gets off on a thing, for the sheer fact that we are sitting here it's been a year, right at a year since he was charged, that we are having a trial. And he got a trial in a year and got his speedy trial motion heard, and they're checking the box and giving it to him, is a testament to his power and pull in this community.
Amy, I don't know if you're willing or able to share this, but do you know Alec Murdock? Have you met him? And what kind of person was he, if you did meet him, when you met him?
I met him because he used to be the head of the trial lawyers, right? Our trial lawyers association, and people in his firm are and they are very good trial lawyers, right? Did I know him personally? No. Do I know attorneys at that firm? Yeah. And matter of fact, I was a speaker at the trial lawyers conference this summer, and I met his brother. He sat on my.
Prior to all this blowing up, what was Alec Murdoch's reputation?
That he was a great lawyer and a good person. I mean, like a jovial guy who got good outcomes for his client.
And can you make sense of this, how this all imploded?
Honestly, I think, and I've had this discussion like ad nauseum with every attorney I know. Like, we talk about this all the time because it makes me so mad, because I really love being a lawyer. I don't know if you picked up on that. Like this is my jam, right? I love being a lawyer. I love helping people. There is nothing worse than seeing someone who's been wronged by the system, right? And then you be able to help them overcome that and let them tell their story and be able to get them a good verdict or a good settlement or whatever that looks like. So we work really hard all these years, and you put in all the time and all the money, and you hone your skill. And then there's an asshole like Alec Murdock, right? That comes along and just like pulls the rug out from everything that you believe in the justice system, right? And he steals from people. And he wasn't stealing from the rich. He was stealing from the poorest of the poor, the hurt of the hurt, right? Like quadriplegics, 2 little girls who were in a car wreck when her mom and brother were killed, took their money. I mean, like, that's just like, I could drag him behind my Suburban just thinking about it. It just makes me so mad, because I think that so many people knew that this was happening in that community. Very fancy people. I'm going to say that. I think they knew. I know they knew. I think we all know that now. And they didn't do anything about it. And that's unforgivable.
You're talking about the fact that he was stealing money. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That aspect. Okay.
Yeah. I'm talking about this. Now, when it comes to this murder case, my 2 cents on this, I can't wrap my mind around him killing his wife and son. I can wrap my mind around killing your spouse, but not your child. You die for your kid, you don't kill him, right?
I think that's the part that has everyone confused. Susan, to you, I know, you're really an expert on human behavior and people. You're not necessarily a profiler. But what do you make of Alec Murdoch, the person that someone could potentially have murdered their wife, and as Amy just said, their son? I have a son. I have 2 daughters. It's unfathomable. I interview a lot of times a person that you know well, which is Detective Phil Waters. He always says to me, given the right circumstances, anyone is capable of a horrible crime. But for the most part, you can't really wrap your head around someone who's got a criminal or a sociopathic or a psychopathic mind. You can't really understand where they're going, because we don't think that way. But what is your take on Alec Murdaugh, the person?
Well, first of all, I said to Phil, I said, I never met a murderer I didn't like. And he goes, well, I have. And I said, well, the ones I've met, they're likable, they're approachable, they're unassuming, they're a type of person that they gain your trust very quickly. My experience has been as a trial consultant, when I've gone into the jail and had to meet the defendant, they're usually very nice. But I'm not saying that I love them. That's not like I think they're not guilty. But the point is, it takes a sociopath, narcissistic personality to be able to convince others that they're innocent. That's their secret sauce, right? So the psychopathy that goes by, how did that actually occur? I don't think that it just occurred. I think it was something that was developed early on in age, and it was never, they've never received the right type of counseling. So they've gotten away with a lot, the power, the control. And of course, he's very well admired, builds that narcissism more and more and more. My team and I analyzed Murdoch's 911 call. I think it was for the court TV. We did a trio, if you get a chance to check that out. And so we did voice stress analysis on it. We did the statement analysis. Of course, I did the behavioral analysis. And when we look at the bigger picture, it was off the rails deception. So the thing is that I noticed mostly with his vocal cords, I'm listening to when he's calling 911, and his vocal cords are strained. Okay, that was the number one indicator for me, because that's a stress indicator. And then also, he's very polite. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And then you hear these long pauses in between, and he's waiting for the 911 dispatcher to ask a question, and he's kind of disengaged, right? So I'm putting myself there, and I'm also timing these pauses in between, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, and that there is science behind when I'm coding human behavior is what are clusters of behaviors with voice, words, and behavior that would lend me to that there's deception indicated. So with that being said, I can't wrap my head around why a person would do that, but I also can't wrap my head around why Casey Anthony would have wrapped her child's face with duct tape and thrown it into a pond, which is right near here. So, I mean, I've been in these cases myself, and it's mind-boggling. The only thing I can say to you, that evil really does exist. And that's where I think the core of it is. I think that is a massive soul corruption. And it's just plain evil based on greed. And that's why I think when we're talking about jurors, and you actually, brought my thinking here, Amy, clearer, is because when I stated for Court TV and for Ashley Banfield, like, what is a potential juror? Who would you be looking for, defense versus prosecution? And I was saying, well, for prosecution, I want those hardworking, middle class, lower income people, right? I want those that are saying, you know what, I worked my butt off for everything that I've got. And here you got all these rich people over here. They've got the big house. They got all of this stuff. And you just really confirmed it to me when you were saying that the people he was stealing from wasn't. And I'll tell you what, I would be playing that up big time. I'd be looking for those low income workers, those strong egalitarians, which is generally the opposite of what I would be looking for. Because I would normally be looking for very authoritative people that would be able to render a verdict where lack of emotion, right? And you see, that's what's so cool about jury selection. I'm going to flip it, right? So I'm not going to go with what I normally do, what my normal strategy would be, what we are taught to look for. I'm going to go in the other end because I really think it's those low-income workers, those ones that had to save their whole year's savings to be able to go to Orlando, go to Disneyland with their kids. That's what I want. That's who I want on my jury if I were prosecuting Murdoch.
Susan, I wanted to ask you, so you mentioned that 911 call, and you said you could detect stress in his voice. Yes. One would assume that if your wife and son were murdered, that you would be stressed out. This is a different type of stress that you're hearing?
Yes, it's a different tone. When a person is forcing stress, it'll strain your vocal cords. Like these cords right here have become hoarse, right? So it's not the same type of vocal tremors we're looking for when a person is stressed out. And then taking into account all of the other factors, right? The pauses, the hesitations, the politeness. We know the number one factor too is that people that tend to be very polite, they do that for a particular reason, right? So politeness is an indicator of deception. So we saw deception all over it. So, he's not telling us the truth. There's a lot more to the story than he's telling us.
And Amy, if you're prosecuting this, I know you're on the other side of the aisle, but are you bringing in a Susan to make this case that there was stress on the 911 call?
I mean, the state has unlimited funds. Of course I am. Yes, I am. And I'm paying her premium. But
awesome.
I think Susan's right on the head. You want, if I were prosecuting this, I would want lower income people, right? And I hate to say this, but lower income white people.
Yes, exactly.
Not people of color, because people of color have seen what the police department will do to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they can shift and plant drugs and all these other things because we see it day after day. They do the wrong thing. So I would want lower income white people.
Yeah.
And we talked about this earlier today. If I were defending this, I would want rich white people, super educated as I could get, preferably if I could get an engineer on, because I've seen the majority of the evidence in this case. I have friends that are involved in it. And I would, because it just doesn't make sense. The evidence doesn't make sense, what I have seen.
Yeah.
And Amy, I thought that was interesting.
You're going to have someone that on the defense side that says 1+, and engineers are so great because feelings don't come into it. Because I truly believe if he's convicted, and I think he will be, it will be on gut. It will be on their feelings, because we all know that about juries. So if you don't get someone who's very analytical on it,
well, and the other piece of that, what I would be looking for, Amy, too, is on Murdoch's side is I want people that are in the gray area though too, because they're not necessarily black or white, but they're gray. So they don't look at things. There's also other reasons what could have happened, right? Yeah. Those that are more curious, they don't just take your word for it. You got to prove it. So that's the CSI factor, people, right? Because since this is such a highly circumstantial case, right? Mm-hmm. I would be I would be looking at more of a juror that would say, hey, I don't know. It's not quite what you say it is, but I'm more open-minded. They're very analytical. The pieces have to pull together. And that's why jury selection is like an art and science. I love it. I mean, just as much as Amy loves what she does, I find it, yeah, it's fascinating when you have to put all the pieces together, and you have to do it very quickly. You have to scan, you have to do a very quick scan, read on people, because as you stated, that you don't have the opportunity to ask all of the probative questions or enrolling questions to get to know who they are. So you've got to base it on from they walk in the door, you're scanning them from head to toe. How are they walking in the room? Are they making eye contact with the defendant? How are they dressed, right? Tattoos they're wearing, graffiti
starts the minute they walk in the door.
Stuff. It's all demeanor evidence. All of this stuff is so important. It tells you a lot about their socioeconomic background, tells you about their education level. And we do, regardless whether we believe it or not, we do judge people. I mean, we judge people by the way they look, they present themselves, the way they walk, their stride, their confidence level, etc. And that's what I'm looking at. But here's another one that I like to watch. And this is something maybe, Amy, you could do when you're in, maybe you do it already, but watch their blinking rate. When you get the panels together and they ask us an open question, maybe to the gallery, look to see how many, watch the eyes, scan the eyes. And when you see someone's eyes that are more fixed, they tend to be more the high listeners, the analyticals, right? The ones that their eyes will blink, they tend to be more on the emotional side. They seem to be triggered by different things. So watch their eye movements compared to other ones, because you can see the cognitive load. So
I also watch to see if a juror is trying to make a connection with me or another attorney. I don't want them on my jury.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
They want to be on that. They're trying to get on that jury.
Yeah.
And something about it feels wrong. Whether it's for me or against me, I don't know, but it feels wrong. And if I can't tell the difference, then I don't want them.
This next comment here is from Fat Batman, which I sometimes have felt like on Halloween. And he writes, there's no video, or she writes, I don't know. There's no video in the jury selection. There's only audio. From your perspective, Susan, good or bad?
Well, it's always better when you have video or you can see them. Are you talking about in the courtroom that no one can see them outside? Because that's common. No one ever can see a juror.
When they first started, they were streaming and they were showing the juror members, and it got shut down very quickly. Like, no, we're not going to.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I've never seen that happen. That's new to me, because usually that's, they don't want to have them identified because they don't want people, harassing them afterwards. But bottom line is, it's better when you're in the courtroom and you can watch them. Now, if they're in the jury box or in the gallery, you can't see them very well from their hip on or from the waistline down. So you can't see what their feet are doing, or if they're rocking them, or if they're rubbing their hands on there. We don't know if they're doing any grooming gestures or soothing gestures. We don't know that. So now you're listening at pitch, vocal tones, articulation, modulation, all of those things are very important. But what I really hone in on is what they say, how they say it. So I've been highly trained in statement analysis, listening to pronoun usages and how they use their articles, where they open up and begin the conversation. I'm listening to every word they're saying, because every word was one that they chose from their subconscious mind. They're the one that chose for that word to come from in their head, out of their mouth. And I want to know why are they thinking what they're thinking? And their language literally tells a story in itself.
That's amazing. That's an amazing science
love
for
Susan.
sure. Tilo is a friend of the show. Joel, can you ask Susan what her opinion is on the ones who said they already made up their minds and were dismissed? Does she think their minds were made up for or against? Susan?
Well, if they say that they already had their mind made up, in my opinion, that says guilt. So a lot of times if people are trying to get off the jury, they don't want to be on the jury, they might say, well, if he's in the courtroom, he had to have done something wrong, right? Or, I've already made my mind up, because what they're saying is what they know, that if they have a very firm belief system that's unshakable, then they're going to be excused. They're just going to be excused. So that I think if that they already had their mind up, could be the number one, they already thought he was guilty, and they want to get him out as fast as they can so he doesn't pollute the rest of the jury. But the other part is, I think they just want to get out of jury selection. It's a way for them not to have to sit through the trial for 3 weeks.
Amy, obviously you're at the epicenter, a few hours away. Is it a situation with a dubbed now as the trial of the century, where pretty much anywhere you go, this is what people are talking about in town, in your town?
Absolutely. Every attorney I got on the phone with today to make a phone call, they're like, "What are you doing?" I mean, even in civil cases, like defense attorneys, insurance defense. Amy, oh my God, are you watching this shit? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm watching it. I was talking to a prosecutor today. I had a break in a case and I needed to talk to him about it. And he's like, I'm going to gain 20 pounds. We were laughing because we were both eating at the same time. And we're like, all we've done is listen to, we've got our own cases to worry about. We need to take a step back and I don't know, worry about them and not this case. But it's because it's an attorney. You know what I mean? We expect, doctors, lawyers, police officers to be held at this higher standard. And when they're not, it's devastating.
It's already a small area, and then you narrow it down to the legal world, and all the lawyers, I'm sure, are glued to it. I don't want to put you on the spot here with Sarazona's question, but I will. Do we know if Buster Murdaugh, the surviving son, is he supporting his father at this point, Amy? Are we aware of this?
Yeah, no, he's absolutely. Matter of fact, I saw him in August. He showed up at the trial lawyers conference, which I thought was weird because he's not an attorney. I was like, wow, why are these people showing up here? We don't want your stink on us. I hate to say that, but that's just what the reality of life is. And it just brings a bad name because we're all doing these really great things for people who really need help. And then they come in and that's the story. It's not that we're helping a paraplegic get some kind of justice and be taken care of for the rest of his life. And it wasn't, you know what I mean, for something that was no fault of his own. That's not the story anymore. It's this great win, or I exonerated an innocent man. And I'm talking about it in this continuing education, conference. It's not about that anymore. Now it's about them. And I think that was probably the most disappointing part. But yeah, no, listen, I've listened to every jailhouse call of Alec Murdock, right? 7.5 hours. Listen to all of them. He is very loving to his son, and his son is very kind of agitated at times, like you would expect with your parents. But they have a very loving relationship. He has a very loving and kind relationship with his siblings, with his sister-in-law, and like I said, that's the part. I think that. Let me also say this too. I think that he got his wife and son killed. I think he knows what happened to them. I just don't think he pulled the trigger.
Yeah, and the fact that there's 2 weapons, which we'll get into. Just following up, Amy, with Baby Doll's question, I'm wondering if Buster will be called and for what side. Do you have a intuition on that?
I don't think that they will call him. I mean, I know that they listed 250 potential witnesses, but people don't realize that in a civil case, you have a list of witnesses. We already know what they're going to say when they get on the stand because we've deposed them and they've admitted all this stuff. But in a criminal trial, I call it trial by fire. I make jokes like I will try 10 civil cases for every murder trial or even a DUI trial because it's trial by ambush, right? Because you get your witness list that morning when you're picking a jury, you swap witness list and you're trying to scan going, oh shit, who are these people? Because you swear there's a couple names that are in there that you just kind of throw in just to throw somebody off so they spend all their time looking for who that is. But they just list everybody in that discovery. And he's on that list. I just don't foresee them calling him. I don't think he brings anything to the table. I just don't like, he wasn't there. His multiple witnesses that he was in, I think he was in Colombia when it happened. I've looked at some of the discovery and talked to some attorneys involved about, like, I just don't really think he brings anything to the table. And I think it will only, I mean, he's lost his mom and his brother in the most horrific way. And to put him on the stand would do nothing but make his life harder. And I don't think it would add anything to the case on either side.
Susan, of the 3 panels that went through voir dire yesterday, 51% were women, 49% men, 69% white, 31% black. And then of the jurors who are going to continue on to the striking phase of jury selection, those who are making it through, 71% are white, 29% are black or Hispanic. I think Amy was just saying she would prefer a poor white juror. Is that right, Amy? And Susan, I'm just wondering what you make of these numbers, that 71% are white, 29% are black or Hispanic. Is that favorable to Alec Murdock or no?
You know what? I'm not going to debate the ethnicity issue, because it is one that is, we kind of run across the Batson challenge, that run into that. So, but just know that ethnicity does play a part in it. It's kind of that unspoken word. I worked for JuryQuest years ago. They were the ones that helped in the jury selection in the Andrea Yates retrial, insanity trial. And that was all based on demographics, your age, ethnicity, occupation, level of education, if they've served on a jury or not. And all those calculations, what they have found generally, that African Americans are much more egalitarian than authoritarian, are much less to convict. Maybe that has to do with because they've been accused of that African Americans commit more crimes, and it's not the case. Okay, so maybe it comes from that place. But I think, to Amy's point, because this case is with an attorney, I don't know in that community what the census tells us about the social data, the social science data in that area. Is it primarily white? But I want to have some. First of all, women generally are much tougher on crime than men. Bottom line, we know that, right? Now you add that they've been divorced, they've been struggling financially, they're more pissed off. So when you look at at the calculations of this, they did studies with, it was Abbott and Batt did over 23 demographic factors, and they were able to determine, based on different calculations of age, ethnicity, occupation, level of education, they served on a jury or not, who tends to be more apt to convict than acquit. So generally speaking, not usually white women or white people in this case. But that's why I share with my clients and the attorneys, you can't take this cookie cutter belief that you've been taught in law school, because it doesn't apply to every case. Every case has its own nuances, and it has to be treated that way. So Amy is right on point. I think that, they're the pissed off white women, divorced, and I think they would be the perfect juror.
And Lilibeth Vieja, who is from my neck of the woods in Miami and a friend of the show, agreeing with Amy, he probably outsourced the murders. And then this comment, money problems can create evil choices. Why is that, Susan, and particularly men, when they seem to get in financial problems, they lose their minds?
It goes to ego, right? Mm-hmm. Their status. Why do people do heinous things? They want to protect themselves. In his case, it's status, right? There's no one's going to harm him, right? So what else has he got? He's got a status, his image. He's got to keep up his community. He's been, he's a lawyer. Everything leads to his status. If you take that away, and that highly narcissistic person who is really very insecure underneath, the only thing that they have that they built is their image. right? So when that starts to fall, look at Bernie Madoff. Look at him. How many people he stole from, right? So he was an ultimate con man. They can justify, in his own mind, he's probably thinking, I can always pay it back. And they always have their scheming. They're always constantly conning and scheming. And keep in mind, this didn't happen just as he's gotten older. This is something that has happened when he was younger, that never got dealt with, that built this person to become a narcissist sociopath.
I want to go to an airport or dinner one night with Susan and Phil Waters and just people watch. You imagine that? the way they people watch. Mary P writes, right up your alley, Susan. No rhythmic breathing, but sobbing equals pretend. Is that the correct mathematical calculation here?
She said, what was the first part?
No rhythmic breathing, but sobbing about this 911 call equals pretend.
I don't know if I would say it's equal. There's more to that piece. I want to see what was the context of that person crying. So everything is taken into context. So I do a scan analysis. What is the context? What created stimulus? And then what was the outcome? Watching the demeanor. And then I'm also reading all these muscles, 42 muscles in the face. What's firing? What muscles are not firing? Is that a true emotion? So certainly we've seen this even with Casey Anthony in her new documentary, and the timing is just off. I know what to look for timing, so they can't BS me. I'm sorry, they can't. So I've been trained too doggone long, and I know whether they're lying or not, if it's fake. So I want to see that the rhythmic breathing is hyperventilation. They're hyping themselves. I've seen this happen before. And then when they do, they become an emotional flood. And when they do that, it's a forced one. It's like the vocal cords forced, right? So I need to see what the face is doing to see if it's consistent. And I don't know because I haven't seen it.
An honest answer. Nod says, hi all, big fan from Boston. Thanks for all the amazing content, STS. We are pumping out great content, but hopefully I'm not losing my wife and 3 children in the process. But I think they are supporting me at this point still. So we haven't even really gotten to the meat and potatoes of the trial itself and what happened in the courtroom. Just we've been talking about jury selection up to now. Counselor Lawrence Lovely. I love that. So key ballistic evidence we're finding out today will be allowed. Prosecutors won a major pretrial motion over the admissibility of key ballistics evidence, along with accompanying testimony from expert witness Paul Greer. He is with the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division, otherwise known as SLED. He basically traced ammunition used in the murder of one of Murdoch's victims to ammunition found at other sites on the family hunting property where they were killed, and tied all this ammunition to a missing gun owned by Alec Murdock. How big a win is this, Amy, for the state that they will be able to bring this witness forward?
I hate ballistic science. I think it's junk science, to be quite honest with you. And I think he kind of proved the point when he was testifying, Greer. So in fingerprint analysis, you have to have so many points, right, that match. But in ballistics, it's just whatever he feels like, right? I feel like it looks like it's similar. But what the evidence shows is that the cartridge near Maggie's body, right, which was this black cartridge for an AR, we don't know if that was the bullet used to kill her. We don't know. We just know it was near her body, this cartridge. And this was at hunting lodge, right? Every hunting attorney of any clout has hunted and shot guns on this property. Judges, attorneys, everybody. So we know that this cartridge near Maggie's body matches a cartridge that has been shot on another part of this property that they collected. That's all we know. We don't know if it killed Maggie. We just know the cartridge near her body believe it's the same cartridge. It was shot from the same gun because it has a similar fingerprint. And I use that word loosely. as this other cartridge. So I'm not sure it really tells us anything. What I was confused was with Jim Griffith when he is crossing, like I would have tore him apart, that expert, because, and I would have never brought this as a motion in limine. I would have, because the point that Jim Griffin was trying to make is, do all these types of guns with this type of cartridge make this kind of like, it's called like ballistic. It's like like the coil, and it makes that like a notch on the cartridge, right? In a certain way. And he's like, well, I don't know. Well, what if all of them do that? I would have already known that. I would have already had a ballistic expert looked at it, tested I would have gotten 50 ARs that looked just like that, got the same exact cartridge, and seen if any of them matched up. Because if that's the case, then it proves nothing, except that they're similar guns that have been shot. That's it. We don't know whose it was or where.
The prosecutor here, his name is Creighton Waters, said, we believe, and I quote now, we believe that substantial evidence shows that they are from a .300 blackout AR style rifle that was purchased by Alec Murdock and can no longer be accounted for. So that's obviously a very crucial piece of evidence. That is to point out that both murder weapons are MIA, and I don't mean Miami, I mean missing in action. This next question, I had to Google this word. Would you say he's an anomic family annihilator, Susan? Family no longer served his ego's purposes. Anomic, my mother, I hear her voice in my head, and she'd say, Google it if you don't know what it is, which is exactly what I did. And anomic means socially disorganized, disoriented, or alienated. But this is an interesting question. Did his family, and again, this is Susan, the psychologist and the human behavior expert, more than the jury consultant, did his family just no longer mean to him what he needed it to mean, and then he went off and killed his wife and son?
Well, first of all, let me preface, I am not a psychologist. I have a master's degree in psychology, but I am not a psychologist. So to be able to diagnose him, I really would need to have the degree and also to sit down and talk with him. So I think it would be improper for me to put a diagnosis with what I feel like he is. I go back to that he absolutely has no disregard or has no regard for life. His value system is not normal. Okay. What he's thinking about how this is going to affect him further on. Like, he doesn't look at any sort of repercussions. He doesn't have the emotional connection. And that's where, when you're getting to the sociopath, is that they lack empathy. They don't have the normal regulators that you and I would have and the connection. So he was able to discard them without any problem. So whether it's the husband, wife, child, I mean, guys, we have covered, all of us have so many cases of where spouses have been murdered and children have been murdered. I mean, how does a person actually do that? We don't have that kind of a mind to be able to even wrap our own natural minds around it. And it's getting worse, because it seems to me that, in my personal opinion, the fact that people are seeing so much violence all the time, they're becoming numb to it. It's like and we're looking at this in the Idaho murders. How was he able to walk in, kill those 4 people? And it's strange when you look at his psychopathy, right? Here's a guy that's going to be getting a doctorate degree in criminology. They're trying to figure themselves out. Figure that one out. It's crazy.
Well, I was just saying to my wife, 18 people died over 2 days in California, and it's barely, and I was a news correspondent for many years. In the old days, that would have been a week long, at least, maybe 10 days in the news cycle. It's already basically out of the news cycle. Within 48 hours, we are as a society becoming really immune to this, and it's scary when you really stop to think about it.
I think that started with Sandy Hook, right? The minute we all didn't fall apart,
yeah,
and do anything when 22 children were murdered in their school, that's when for me, that's when it started, right?
And
that's
I covered that, and
I've
said this before. I covered that story. I was there within hours, and all the journalists there who were parents were having a real hard time. I didn't have children at that point, and I'm thankful, because having them now, it would have been much tougher to cover for sure. First impressions are everything, Susan. Jolie Evans, who's a fan of the show, just writes, he looks very odd. It's a very simple statement. When you look at Alec Murdock, what is your first reaction?
I see a lack of emotion, and a lack of real seriousness about what's actually happening. I see a sense of arrogance about him. And especially when he's holding his glasses up and he's kind of biting on the tip of it, and he's looking more like the evaluator. He's actually presenting himself more like the attorney than he is actually the defendant. So that sense of, again, that narcissism is showing out. I don't see the expressions that would fire, like worry, concern, nervousness, anxiousness, which you would, if you're going to be on trial for murder, you're going to show these kind of emotions. He's emotionless. He's got such a high level of arrogance that I think he in his mind, he's got convinced he's going to get away with it. And that's what I see.
I don't think he's ever had a consequence for an action in his entire life.
There you go.
And why is it going to start today? He's got
things that I wanted to bring attention to. I just got back from London, and my daughter lives out there. And I was in a grocery store. When you're talking about how this gets so spread and so big, I'm sitting there in the grocery store, and I'm listening to the clerks talk about the Idaho murders. And so the thing is that with the internet right now, it's like in social media, it feels like it's happened next door. Right. And so when you're hearing this stuff always, constantly, the news, everything you turn on, we do become desensitized to it. Here in Orlando, we had the Pulse nightclub shooting. That was a big, huge terrorist attack that was right here. And now you never really hear about it anymore. It's really sort of sad. I think that even people that have empathy, we have just learned to compartmentalize them, our thoughts. We've just kind of put it over here, and we just don't. That's horrible. It's terrible. You have empathy, but there's so much of it that we are becoming overloaded, right? So our natural reaction is to go into protection mode, right? Protection of our emotions, protection of our mind, our thoughts. And so, you see people kind of pushing it away, not because they don't care. It's just that it's too much. It's stimulating.
Well,
right, Amy?
So I feel everything very big. My feelings are very big on everything in life.
Yeah.
I always say that. I wear my heart on my sleeve and my feelings on my face sometimes, because I will find myself like crying in the middle of a trial because I'm so overwhelmed by the emotion because I love my client or whatever it might be. But if we leaned into the feeling of the empathy, right, for all these things that we eat, we'd be a puddle on the floor every day. So you have to. It's like survival mode.
Yeah. And Alex Murdaugh, he's got a great book of his. I think it's called Mission One, and he was the one that used empathy-based listening to capture Saddam Hussein. I think it was Saddam Hussein. Was it Saddam Hussein or one of the other? Any one of the horrible terrorists. But the point is that empathy-based listening wasn't about compassion. Empathy-based listening is more about understanding how that other person is seeing things from their perspective, right? But what you're right, Amy, you get yourself so wrapped up into it emotionally, then you lose your critical thinking ability. So you got to be really careful. There's that balance. I'm also a mediator, and you can also listen to both sides. You're totally convinced this one here, and then you come over here and you're going, wait a minute, this one over here, you're lying to me over here, right? So, and it's hard not to put that aside. You have to force yourself to compartmentalize it in order to survive. You just have to.
Believe it or not, I put a rundown together for this show like my old news days. And when you have two super smart women like this, it gets blown to pieces because you're just going off the rundown. But I love it. Coop 3000, who is a friend of the show and comments often. What's up, Coop? And this is to Susan. What do you make of the one juror who invariably falls asleep at some point in the trial? I've had it happen probably 90% of the time. I do think Coop is a lawyer. What do you make of that, Susan? The sleeping juror.
Well, they have narcolepsy. I saw the same thing in the George Zimmerman trial. We had one juror that sat there and almost slept through the whole thing. And what's scary about that is when it comes time to deliberations, where's the notes? You can't remember and recall because we only recall a fraction of what we hear, right? He's not writing it. So you're not really taking notes to go. So what that person's doing is going to depend on what everybody else thinks. But to me, when I see somebody that's falling asleep, I wish we could remove them, because if they're not able to stay and be attentive, then they're doing the entire system a disjustice, both sides. So I would say it's number one, it's a physical problem, right? The person is trying to force their way through. I don't think that it's that person doesn't do that on a normal basis. They do it under other situations too. I think they have an issue. But to say that, they don't care, they're going to just fall asleep during it, they're trying to send a message or whatever, I'm not so sure that's the case, especially if they're not taking notes and they're not really retaining, and they're going to depend on what somebody else says when they get in deliberation room.
They're going to go with the flow.
Back, right, Amy? Yeah.
They're going to go with the flow.
Yeah.
They're
It's
not
either, either narcolepsy or 3 kids 8 and under, like my case. So Amy, to you, there's another issue that is becoming or looming large in this trial, and that is money as the motive. According to Creighton Waters, the prosecutor, he'd been stealing for over a decade. He has 99 criminal counts to date, essentially facing life without parole on these particular financial accounts. And that's the significance of what he was trying to prevent from being exposed. So this is the theory that the state is basically using to say why he murdered his wife and son, is that he was looking for essentially sympathy to distract from all his financial crimes. People say that that is essentially a very weak argument in terms of motive on the side of the state and the prosecution. Do you agree with that the state will have a hard time saying, look, he killed these 2 people because he wanted sympathy? That is hard for many people to believe. Again, spouse maybe, but your own son to get sympathy, is that believable?
I think it's horseshit is what I think it is. Total
By the way,
horseshit.
has the judge ever cited you for cursing in the courtroom by any chance?
No, they know me. They're like, damn it, Amy, you gotta stop. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm sorry, but it was horseshit too. Like.
So what are you saying is horseshit? This
motive, right? Okay,
yeah.
So his family is very, very, very wealthy, right? He could make a phone call and somebody could dig him out of it very quickly. I mean, his law firm alone could stroke a check for millions of dollars and never dipped into any kind of lien or mortgage or anything like that. They just stroked a check. These are very, very, very rich people. He stole a lot of money. The idea, because I mean, the cat was out of the bag at this point. They'd already were asking questions and finding out, right? It was out of the bag. So you're telling me and his wife and his son, they weren't just killed. They were executed, right? They were shot multiple times, and the kill shot was both to their heads. That's not normal when killing a family member or someone you love. It's just not normal. So the idea that he would do all this to try to throw everybody off and get a little sympathy just doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think it's the worst motive ever, right? But I don't think that they have a motive, so that's what they're going to cling to. I mean, if he was trying, so a lawyer friend of mine said, well, we know that Maggie died with no money, essentially, like a couple homes, like a home, and which was his anyway. It could have been taken. It just doesn't. If he was going to kill somebody for money, if he was trying to get money, he was trying to get a hold of money to pay these people back. Why didn't he just go kill his dad? He was within a couple of days of dying, and he inherited a trust that has millions and millions of dollars in it. Wouldn't that be the more rational thing? And he was going to die anyway. Why go and murder your and execute your wife and son. That makes no sense to me. I think that motive is the worst, but I don't think they have a motive. So that's what they're sticking with.
Well, I mean, do you feel that this jury ends up hung because of that? I mean, because there's going to be enough reasonable doubt, because they're going to say, well,
I mean, in order to get to that, they're going to have to get to he's a complete just fucking sociopath and he just kills people, right? I mean, they're going to have to take the lead, because what we do know about Murdoch, we haven't learned anything else, is that there's always dead bodies around him, right? There's no evidence that he's involved in the Stephen Smith case, right? But all that stuff makes absolutely no damn sense.
For those of you who are just tuning in, there was a housekeeper that wound up dead. There was a young woman on a boat that wound up dead. Stephen Smith was a young man who wound up dead, and all under
the Murdoch name is coming up, right? Yeah. And it keeps getting put to bed. Like as every time it comes up, it gets put to bed because of his power. And what people don't really understand is like this family really did have all the power, right? A prosecutor has the most power because they can put anybody in prison they want to, right? They can prosecute it with the full arm and backing of the government with all the resources that they have, So they really did have all the power. I mean, he had blue lights in his car and a badge. On top of being, a personal injury attorney, he also was a special prosecutor who only got involved in some really weird. He came in and made some deals on some trafficking drug cases that were not his cases. I think that there is something way bigger at play here that no one has uncovered, and I don't think they will, because I don't think anybody wants it to be uncovered. I think the attorneys involved in this case are chosen because they can control a narrative. I really do believe that. And it protects everybody, and it keeps him from going off the rails and spewing whatever has happened. I don't know if it's drug trafficking. I don't know if it's human trafficking, but there is something so much bigger at play here that we all don't know about. And I'm not sure we ever will know about it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this comment was interesting from Mona Walker. Do you think some people are in fear of their life to be on this jury? Susan, have you ever come across that it's such a high profile case with powerful people involved that some people just want no part of it because they're scared?
Well, some people don't want any part of it just because of the gruesomeness of it. Emotionally, they can't tolerate or handle looking at, because they're going to be shown pictures, etc., that it's just too much emotionally for them, for anxiety reasons, PTSD, etc. But to be fearful of it, and that was one of the questions that Court TV asked me, or I think it was Ashley Banfield, how do you know if somebody's being fearful? And I said, well, can you tell in their body language? I said, yes, you can. This is the person that leans back, leans off to the side, puts their hands over their face to disguise themselves. Okay. They are people that are feeling incredibly uncomfortable because, this is not, you've heard about witnesses or jurors being killed, right? In cases, we've seen it, we've heard it, TV shows about it. It can happen. So, yeah, I think that there are people that have that fear in them. And I think it's real. I think that's a real concern. I don't think it's for everybody, but I think it is a concern to think about.
I love this comment. I usually don't take the same person twice, but Fat Batman writes, Susan's skills would be very valuable in the dating market, analyzing people's dating partners or potential dating partners. You mentioned your daughter in London. I don't know if she's single or not, but you must have an interesting take on the people your children are dating, Susan. You can read everyone's behavior.
Yeah, I have to be really careful with that because, we're taught and trained that we're not supposed to use it in our own personal lives, but we do. But yeah, like, for example, my daughter was getting into some texting and risky behaviors, was sending some picture. I don't want to go there, but anyway, Mom caught right onto that one real quick and stopped it, nipped it in the bud. Yeah, in the dating arena, people have asked me, can you tell if somebody is really into you? And there are certainly signs of attraction and so forth, but it's hard to kind of put something, past me, but you really do have to be careful. I talked to Phil and we did a casting for a new TV show that we're being considered for. And he was asked the question, do you ever turn it off? He said, I never turn it off, right? And I said, I do turn it off because I don't err on a place of where people are, guilty. I don't like to live in that really negative place. I'm assuming that people are honest. Some people come in and say I assume they're lying until they prove otherwise. But for me, I do the opposite because I'm looking for signs and signals and so forth. But in the dating arena, especially when it comes to app dating, I've told this with my kids, and I drill it home. Do not accept a date and meet somebody that you met on an app. You put them on Skyping, you're going to Zoom them. You want to see who they are, their facial expressions, and you do background checks. I do background checks. If I drill it home because it's like such a huge thing for me, because it's real. You're watching Dr. Phil, and they'll talk about how many of these people that have been murdered and beaten up and raped and so forth off these apps. It's a real thing. I'm not in favor of it. I'd rather meet somebody face to face. But actually, I met my husband when I was speaking at a conference, and he pointed me out and reached out to me. And of course, I did a background check on him and everything else. And finally, I said, "Yeah, okay, he's cool. He doesn't have anything in his background. He doesn't have very many tickets. So now he meets
registry check."
So I'm telling all you ladies out there, listen, we don't want to invade people's privacy, but don't be so naive. A lot of times, women especially, they explain away certain things, right? They explain away certain behaviors. I take things at face value. What they say and what they do is exactly what they feel and who they are. That's how I look at it.
She's got the Dolly Parton. She takes the Dolly Parton approach. When they show you who they are, believe them.
There you go.
Lindsay Shea's got a comment here that is one of my favorites because it's about the show. Just joining a little late. I make sure to never miss an episode. This has become my favorite podcast to listen to. STS definitely has the best guests. We don't lie. That is our promise. And you're saying why tonight. And you better hit that like button to get our algorithm chugging. Now, back to the actual case. Amy, to you. So to this notion of money as a motive, and you saying that it's a weak motive to try to elicit sympathy, and that's why he killed them. Dick Harpootlian, he is the famed defense attorney who's apparently very skilled. First off, do you know him, and what is his reputation as a defense attorney?
I do know him. He has really moved away from criminal defense and does more plaintiff's work, civil stuff. And he's an incredible, matter of fact, I remember him talking to my law school class before I took the bar. And I was like, he's great. Part of what makes him so great is that he's a straight, like he shoots from the hip. Like today in motion hearings, he's like, you're telling me that to garner some sympathy, he blows his wife's head off and his son's head off? Like, this makes no sense. Like, that's how I like that. Like, that's how I feel in my heart. I don't know if I would exactly say that in front of a jury necessarily, but like, it's like that kind of like bluntness that I think we all really appreciate. Like, that just doesn't make any damn sense. Like, come on, people. Is this all you got? He's very skilled in what he does. You know, he is one of the attorneys that led the Emmanuel Church settlement for the $88 million when Dylan Roof came in and killed so many people. He's got these huge verdicts, these huge settlements. He's a state senator here in South Carolina. He has probably more political pull than anybody, which is, I don't know why he got involved in this.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's kind of a case and a case study in power in a power-filled small community, and you've got a guy with a ton of power running the show for the defense here. But he did come out today in response to all this about the money motives and say, and this is a direct quote, his theory, meaning his client's theory, is that he knew the jig was up, so he went home and blew the head off his son and blew the head off his wife, said Harpootlian. There's not one shred of evidence there were any problems between any of them. If I'm hearing that from a guy who's got a lot of moxie, I am going to maybe believe, what he's saying to me. Frank Castle maybe should work for the state. His comment says his wife was onto him and his son was in legal trouble. That seems like more of a motive rather than gaining empathy or sympathy. What do you think of that, Amy? The fact that the wife was, allegedly, according to Frank Castle, onto him, and the son was going to basically be a burden when it came to money.
So there's no evidence that his wife was on to anything, right? There's no evidence. There's a lot of there's no one who has came out and said that we all heard this rumor that she had sought a divorce attorney and wanted to do an accounting, like a forensic accounting. There's no evidence. No one will come forward and say that out loud, right? So I don't know. There's been a lot of innuendo and rumor in this case, but I've not seen any of it. We spent our last time trying to save our children, right? He has, I think, a $5 million insurance policy on that boat. It would have been taken care of. I just don't see that as motive. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I think that Dick Harpullian sees it exactly the way I see it. So you're telling me, in order just to throw everybody off, that I'm going to go and butcher, and kill my kid and my wife. And the thing is there is a video that Paul Murdoch had on his phone. I've heard it.
Snapchat video.
This one is the one to his friend, right?
Okay.
I've seen it. I've heard it. They're all laughing and joking around. It's not, there's no, it's like, I don't see it. This is not like people in an argument. They're all laughing. They're joking around. They're talking about a dog.
You're talking about the video he sent right before you're talking about the video right before the murder?
Right.
Okay. But it's the state that's trying to get this admitted, right?
Yes.
But if it shows
they're trying to prove that he was there at a certain period of time.
That's why. Okay.
But when you listen to this, there's no, normally you would hear, if there's this contention where somebody's going to die, there's this something there, everybody's laughing and joking and very sweet. There's nothing weird about it. Like I said, I don't think that he killed them. I think he got them killed. I think somebody was sending a very clear message. I mean, this is a guy who couldn't even kill himself, right? He couldn't even kill himself. He has to call us, from what we understand, according to all these charges, that he couldn't even kill himself on the side of the road. But he's going to call us.
And for those who are just new to the case, that's another crazy aspect, is that he gets a gun, a graze to the head, and turns out he tried to hire someone to kill him so the son could cash in on the insurance policy, and that's a whole other part of this story. Susan, we'll take a couple more comments and then we will wrap it up. Susan got back from London, so we don't want to keep her up too much later. DB writes, are lawyers ever selected for a jury?
I have seen lawyers be selected for a jury, but if I were to think about when it happened, it so far ago, long ago, and I think there was probably one that did, and I don't even know if they were an active lawyer. That might have been somebody that was already retired. I've never seen a police officer accepted that stayed on a jury. And Amy knows this too. I mean, that's the first thing that you remove. Anybody that has that's affiliated with law enforcement, generally it's a big no-no. But I have had a case where I convinced the defense to keep on a father who was served in the military, which is who you wouldn't want to have had somebody on your jury, and also son who's in law enforcement. But the answers to his questions were so on point, and he was so unbiased. He was able to set aside, which is extremely rare. But yeah, a lawyer can be, I would assume. I haven't seen it, only just one. Have you, Amy?
I've seen an insurance defense attorney was on. I walk in to a trial, and some buddies of mine are trying a case, a civil trial, a med mal case, and they're like, "Hey, so and so's in our jury pool. What do you think? I think we're going to put him on there. You think he would throw you a bone?" And I said, "Absolutely not. He will be the smartest person in the room, right?"
You're afraid they're going to be first of all, they're going to be the foreperson because there they'll rule everything, explain everything. That's what you don't want. You don't want to have somebody that come in there as an expert, because they are not experts, on the law. There's different types of law. They specialize in different types of law. When they start invoking their own opinions and swaying other jurors, it's very dangerous. So that type of person, that's the reason why you want to stay away from us, because
but I will say this, all attorneys, like, it is like our secret, like, wish
desire
to be on a jury.
Me too. I have a jury consultant on a
not guilty, all the monies. I want to give them all the monies, and I'll pluralize that because that's what I want to give them, all the monies, and not guilty on everything.
Yeah. See, I if I were ever selected for, I have not. I've gone through that whole process, and they find out who I am. They see my face. They know who I am, and forget about it. It's not going to happen.
There's a New York and Susan. Forget about it. So, Amy, one other bit of information I just want to get through here. Yeah. Alex's shirt. The defense team is seeking to get the court to refuse to admit evidence that authorities said will show blood, meaning the state will show blood from Paul Murdoch spattered on his father's shirt. The defense contends that the shirt was destroyed before they could test it. State experts changed their conclusion on this. Examining the shirt, they changed their conclusions under pressure from state agents. Prosecutors also said at the December hearing that there could just be problems in general with this blood spatter. Some saying it could be potentially from an animal. But this is a big kind of monkey wrench in the case right now. This shirt, does it get admitted into evidence or not? What is your thought on this? Have you given it any?
Oh, I've given it a lot of thought. I've read this motion many times because, well, let me just say this. This is the government and the state, these prosecutors, we see prosecutors all the time that are willing to, and cops, right? That are willing to do whatever it takes for the W, right? And this is a very, very, very big case for the Attorney General's office. It's probably the biggest case that will come out of the AG's office for probably the next 20 years. And to not get a conviction will be major egg on their face, right? There will be a price that's paid for it. I don't know what that is, but there will be, right? I mean, I've had murder cases where cops have, we've caught them blatantly lying. Prosecutors, well, maybe he didn't do this, but he did something. So like, let's make it happen. Let's seal the deal. I've seen it happen. I've seen it up close and personal. That's not what justice looks like in my head. We should fight for somebody's innocence just as hard as we do their guilt if they've done it. But when I read this motion, all I could think of is if what her pulling is saying is true, and it's documented with evidence behind it, and it's factual, then this is the biggest, most awfulest thing that could happen in this case. And it shows you that that's what's happening if this is really what happened. So what they're saying is they test SLED, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, which is our SBI, our State Bureau of Investigation, that they test this shirt to see if it's blood. And it comes back that it's not blood. Okay. And then they seek this expert named Tom Bevel out of Oklahoma, who's a blood spatter expert. And they don't tell him that that it's tested negative for blood. They ask him to review the case. He looks at everything and he says, this isn't blood spatter. This is transfer, from where he leans over and checks them when he finds them, right? This is not consistent with blood spatter. He has a report. They don't give that report to the state, according to Herpulian's motion. They don't ever give that over, okay? But I'll tell you how we get to that point in a minute, how they learn of this. So Bevel says, this isn't blood spatter. This is transfer, okay? So they're like, okay, well, we think that you need to take an extra look at it. And we're going to send SLED agents out with this shirt, and I want you to look at it again. So he looks at it again, and he says, I think it's where he's touched the bodies and wiped his hands on his shirt, okay? And then it comes back that Bevel says, well, I think it is blood. But I wasn't able to tell by the shirt because it didn't look like blood to me, but I could take these raw photos that SLED had which is a part like an image, right? A picture of this shirt, and I can manipulate it on Photoshop. And that's how I can tell that it's blood spatter, right? Okay. But you looked at the shirt and it's not blood because they've already tested it. Yeah, it's blood spatter. Okay. Well, let me see these pictures that you used. And still no one's told anybody from the defense or Mr. Bevel that this is not blood. It is presumptive. It's already been tested and it's not blood. And then they keep testing more of it and putting all this like weird chemical all over it, right? Trying to get it to light up and ruins and essentially deteriorates the shirt. The shirt can't be tested anymore. And then Harpoolian and the defense, they file a motion to compel that says, I want all the data that he used to come up with this. Everything that you have on this shirt, DNA, testing, all this stuff, I want it all. And they send the initial report, one, that it's not blood, and two, his initial report that says this isn't blood spatter, that was never turned over to begin with. They sent it by accident. It's mislabeled as an interview and not interview notes and not what it was. So when they open it up and they're going through all discovery, and there's thousands and thousands of pages. So a paralegal finds it, that it was never blood to begin with, and he never thought it was blood spatter. But SLED goes out there, and now all of a sudden it's blood spatter, right? And he's done a complete 180. Well, the judge rules in December, beginning of December, and says, no, you give them everything that you used, including those photos, because that's the whole hinge of how he comes up with this, like, I want to know, I want you to give it all to the defense. And he never provides the photos, still has not provided those photos to anyone. So that tells me that's some bullshit.
Interesting. Captain Crunch, these types, Susan, this is to you. And by the way, Barbara Florence asks, has Susan been on the show to critique Wendy Adelson? That is a case, the Dan Markel case, that we have gone into extensively on our program. The answer is Susan has not been on, but interestingly, I was speaking with the great Steve Cohen today, our booking producer, about getting Susan on to analyze Wendy Adelson's behavior on the stand. I'm not going to get into the whole details of that trial, but Google Dan Markel and you will find out a very intriguing case that dates back to 2014 with a murder trial coming up in April. But Captain Crunch, to you, Susan, writes, these types don't fear prison. They should be getting the chair. I want to make it clear, this is not a death penalty case. But to you, Susan, was Alec Murdoch just raised so entitled that he's basically missing this element of fear? It's a deterrent. Prison is supposed to be a deterrent. It would appear that he doesn't care about that right now. What is your thought or take on that?
I don't think that he thinks he's going to go to prison. That's why he doesn't have the fear. So unlike like when I'm watching the Idaho the Idaho case, I can see fear and fixation, and I can see worry in the forehead, right? No empathy, of course, but I can see that. I don't see that here in Murdoch. I see that sense of, like I said, entitlement, that arrogance. I think he truly believes that he's not going to go to prison. And also, to part of that narcissism, it's almost like it's a big joke, right? He walks in, he just doesn't appear to like what you would consider being like a murderer, right? He just walks in, but that's part of that whole persona. But underlying all of that, just keep in mind, that person underneath is really a very frail person and highly insecure. All this stuff is all fake. It's just a fake persona, a mask he's wearing. But probably behind closed doors, you might see a different person when he's real with himself.
The woman in the turtleneck is not just anyone. She is Myrtle Beach's criminal defense attorney, Amy Lawrence, a victim advocate, as you heard tonight, a voice for the weak, very important. The 2020 Supreme Court of South Carolina pro bono honor roll recipient. And again, most importantly, mom. But I did forget to mention she was on MTV's Teen Mom 2 and has also been on the Dr. Phil show. So those are two other accolades for the great Amy Lawrence, whose hyphenated last name is lovely and was lovely to have on the show. Amy, what is next that you're looking for in this, what is being dubbed the trial of the century in South Carolina?
You know, I'm excited to like get this jury picked. Let's get this over with. Like, let's get the show on the road. I want to see this opening statement, and I want to see, you know, I'm looking for the evidence that I haven't seen yet, right? We've all heard things, but I really want to see what the prosecution has. And we're going to get a little roadmap of that when we hear opening statements. So I'm really excited about opening statements for sure.
Susan Constantine is one of the nation's leading jury consultants. She's also a body language and communication expert. I need to go to an airport with her and just check people out. She's the owner of the Human Behavior Lab. You know the face because she's been everywhere. Dateline today, you heard that she just did something for Court TV. She's on Fox and Friends, My Old Stomping Grounds, and many other shows. I want to give you a final thought, Susan, but first, Arizona, this will be the final comment. I was on a jury for a drive-by shooting case. We had a taped confession from the shooter, and we were a hung jury. One juror during deliberation said he did not believe in incarceration. This goes to the point, you just never know, and there's no such thing as a slam dunk case, right, Susan?
That's correct. All you do is need just one. That's it. Hung jury.
And so what are you looking for? It looks like they're going to seat the jury by tomorrow, which seems quick to me. And from your perspective as a expert on the human condition, what are you looking for?
Well, it's interesting if Amy is correct that they're, you know, the Murdoch is banking on empathy. Forget about it, because how are they going to be able to stack a jury? Because you really need a majority effect that actually have that level of empathy. I find that to be very hard. I think that I do think that one of the things that will be a big part of it is because the CSI factor is really huge. Are they able to overcome some of the circumstantial evidence and actually tie him to the murder without some of the some more evidence that, you know, we've heard them talking about on the case? But just know that I believe in the jury system. I think most of the time they get it right. I think that when you get behind closed doors, people, even though they have strong opinions about things, they do jump into groupthink, and they do naturally, organically, they tend to move in there and take people's different perspectives and then come up with what they think that's happening. I don't know if in South Carolina whether jurors are able to ask questions. Are they? In the state of Florida, they can. So I always look for that. What are they thinking? Are they coming back out? What's the questions they're asking? Because it's kind of giving me insight of what's going on. But yeah, jury selection is an interesting process. It's an art and a science. It's a game of gamemanship, you know, about who you're going to, you know, that the other party, the other side who's going to want to keep and dismiss. And then it becomes a chess match. It's a very interesting skill to have, is to being a trial consultant.
And speaking of insight, this was incredible insight from both of you. I hope you will come back as we continue to follow this case. BuzzFeed print edition comes on quite frequently. Where is our profile of Surviving the Survivor, BuzzFeed? I'm waiting for that. Quick programming note. We will be live this whole week at either 7 or 8 p.m. I will tweet it out to let you know for sure. And I'm also curious, what do you all think of these live episodes with Q&A? We were doing a lot. We were kind of doing them in the can, as they say, edited versions, but I love the live version. There's a lot of energy. Let me know what you think. And then Susan's good friend, Phil Waters, is back on Friday for your true crime, Phil and Gil.
I love him. He's awesome.
He's the best.
The real deal.
He is a real deal. Love you, America. We'll be back soon enough.
Thank you.